What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here from Hive Mind Hobbies. In this video, we're going to talk about mastering the bug shooting castle. We've got a lot of really good shooting platforms, and we have one very important support piece in our codex that does a great job of pushing all of our bugs up to 11 with damage and positioning. Let's take a look. Okay, the age-old define the thing before we talk about the thing. What's Tyranid shooting castle? What am I talking about? So Tyranids, especially if you're in an invasion fleet, and sometimes Crusher Stampede, maybe even Synaptic Nexus, maybe Assimilation. A lot of our units go very well together in a big old clump castle, specifically around our Hive Tyrant. I talk about the Hive Tyrant and friends. We're talking about the Hive Tyrant, then the Excran, Tyranid, most of the time with Rupture Cannon, Maleceptor sometimes, and Zoanthropes, depending on your preference. And the reason why this is so good is because you can stack the maneuverability of an Assault Aura from the Hive Tyrant as well as lethals. They kept on stapling rules on the Hive Tyrant until people were like, okay, this is good. And I'm very grateful for Games Workshop for just making one of the coolest models we have access to, just a staple on the tabletop. So clumping all of your big bug gun shooting units around this Hive Tyrant is really going to allow for them to get where they need to be, and then also punch a little bit harder with lethals all of the time, no matter what detachment you're in. It can be very powerful if used properly, and I will say, is also very essential for Tyranids, because if you look at the comparison between Space Marine vehicles and bugs, well, first, don't do that because you might be sad. But the movement difference between Space Marine vehicles and honestly other vehicles in general for other armies out there, it can be pretty vast, with our Excran moving 9 or Excran moving 8 and Tyranid moving 9 and our Zoanthropes only moving 5. Our bugs can actually be kind of slow, and it can be hard to get angles on units that we want to activate into. So it is essential that we can use this Hive Tyrant to its fullest. I'm going to show this off in Tabletop Simulator in a second, but I want to talk about how important positioning is. And before we get to our physical examples, just talk about some things that are going to help you position correctly when you're going about your movement phase and your shooting phase. The first thing is, I think it's very essential to either move the Hive Tyrant first or last. And that is either one, you're going to set up all of your gun bugs around the Hive Tyrant, or two, you're going to make sure that your Hive Tyrant can branch out its 6-inch aura to all of the gun bugs that have already moved. And one thing that is going to be almost essential and really, really help you in this is bringing a Hive Tyrant proxy base. If you have 2 Hive Tyrants, bring your second Hive Tyrant, if you don't, then just see if you can find a 60 millimeter base. And so that way, when you're measuring out where your Excrans, Tyranid, Maleceptors are going to be, and you need them to be there with an advance or something, make sure that your Hive Tyrant can land within 6 inches of those units so that you're not put in an awkward position where you've already advanced a bug, but then whoops, your Hive Tyrant can't actually reach that spot, and then it's very, very awkward. So bringing a proxy base, bringing a proxy Hive Tyrant really, really helps you do that. I'm going to show a very good example in Tabletop Simulator in a moment describing that. Next up, if possible, cover the gun bugs with 6 inches within the Hive Tyrant. And this is just to threaten a heroic intervention. If they're wanting to come and tie up your Excran, we'll make it very difficult for them. Make your Hive Tyrant directly next to the Excran, and just say, hey, if you charge my Excran, you're also charging my Hive Tyrant. And I like to kit out my Hive Tyrant with Adaptive Biology as well as the full melee build. So that's not really a unit that a lot of things just want to charge willy-nilly into, and it might protect your Excran or your Tyranid. So if you're able to set it up so that your Hive Tyrant is creating a 6-inch bubble where you think your opponent might be charging, it could be very, very beneficial for the longevity of all of your bugs. And last but not least is, even though we like to castle up, even though we like to have a whole bunch of bugs grouped up together, I think that you should always dedicate 1 to 2 units for reserve or independent fire. So when I was playing a lot of Invasion Fleet, I would have 3 Excrans and then 2 Tyranid and sometimes a Maleceptor, right? So I would have 2 Excrans and at least 1 Tyranid clumped up on my home flank where I know my Hive Tyrant's going to push up with them. And then I would often also have one Tyrannifex and either one Exocrine on the opposite flank or the Exocrine in reserve. And this is going to make sure that if my opponent just kites around my big, huge castle of bugs, that I will still have angles that they can't avoid through my Tyrannifex and my Exocrine that can threaten a different, more vulnerable angle. All right, now to TTS land. We are in TTS land talking about our big bug castle. And this is just a, just a mock-up list. This is Invasion Fleet or whatever gunboat kind of detachment you're playing. We have a Hive Tyrant here, 2 Exocrines here, and a Tyrannifex. And I just wanted to display a couple of things. How far you can get with the 6-inch aura, 6 inches, of course. And then why the importance of using a proxy base is super, super good, and why maybe you should carry around an extra Hive Tyrant or just a 60mm base in order to help out measuring where your Hive Tyrant is so that he can still pass off his buffs and so that your big old bugs are sitting pretty. All right, so I didn't deploy another army, but let's pretend we want this Exocrine to get over here to shoot across the board here. And then we want this Exocrine and this Tyrannifex to come over here and maybe get an angle on the same thing or maybe just shoot downtown. So I think the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure that this Exocrine can see its target. And let's pretend that it's like a gargoyle over here. Okay, so we just need that line right there. So we're first going to move the unit that is not going to be clustered up with the other one. Like if we have one solo Exocrine by itself, you want to move that one first. So let's roll in advance. This doesn't really matter too much. Okay, so he can move 9. So let's say he's going to move 7 inches with the pivot. We're actually not really going to move that far. We're just going to be right here. And the reason we want to move this Exocrine first is so that we can test exactly where the Hive Tyrant has to be in order to pass off the buff to this Exocrine. And then these two, the Tyrannifex, the Exocrine at the bottom, can kind of move a little bit freely down on this below flank right here. Okay, so now here's where your Hive Tyrant proxy comes into play. Using your Hive Tyrant, you're going to place him and kind of find out where 6 inches is going to be. All right, so we've got plenty of space. So 6 inches on that Exocrine, we can go all the way out to here, maybe a little bit further back right there. So our Hive Tyrant can go all the way over there and still pass out that 6-inch buff right there. But we probably actually want it to be kind of hidden. So we're going to put it right there, I think, so it's perfectly behind this wall. And then we need to figure out where we want our lines of shots on this Exocrine and Tyrannifex to go. Let's say this Exocrine is going to sit in that terrain piece right there. You can move up easily. And this is all before you have moved your Hive Tyrant, okay? And then if we're still not sure if that Hive Tyrant is going to sit right there, but we want to make sure that the Tyrannifex is also going to gain the benefits of this buff because there's a chance we might want to advance this Tyrannifex. And of course, he needs to be within 6 in order to see. Okay, so 9 inches right there with the Tyrannifex. I would be concerned that he's not going to quite get the line of fire that he wants. So let's go ahead and roll in advance on the Tyrannifex. 5. Okay, so he can move up to 14 and still be good. All right, so that's probably too far. Actually, it's not. So look, 6 inches. Boom, right there. So if we're all the way here, that means that this 6 inches from this Tyrannifex can gain the benefits from lethal and assault, so we're not in trouble for advancing it or whatever. And then we are touching all 3 of these big old gunboats. And then the last thing that you need to do in order to make sure that your Hive Tyrant placement and your proxying is put into effect, you need to make sure that your Hive Tyrant that you've placed it is wholly within 8 inches of your actual Hive Tyrant. And of course, it's only around 5 inches away. And boom, easy peasy. You can just pick up the original Hive Tyrant. And you have your proxy Hive Tyrant passing out a bunch of buffs to all of these big old bugs. Zoanthropes. I think they're good. right? I think they're good. I didn't include them in that initial example just because I wanted to make sure that we understood like moving around monsters and stuff. I don't personally always use Zoanthropes. My preference is a second Tyrannifex instead of the Zoanthrope blob, but I do think they are good. So let's talk about them. They're great as well. There you go. There's the first bullet point. We've covered that. However, one of the reasons why I don't like Zoanthropes is that they die. And for every 3 wounds that you lose off of Zoanthrope, you lose a whole bunch of efficiency and shots off the Zoanthropes. Yes, the Tyrannifex doesn't have the versatility of a blast weapon as well as the Rupture Cannon, but it doesn't lose any number of shots for every 3 wounds that it loses from the Zoanthropes. So be careful. People say, oh, they've got a 4-up and vulnerable save. I don't know, 10th edition units just evaporate off the board. And it seems to me that there's a whole lot of damage 3 in the game. So your Zoanthropes can just go away immediately if you are not careful. Next, make sure you are intentionally placing your Neurotyrant for movement. Of course, the Zoanthrope brick, we're going to be attaching a Neurotyrant into so they hit on 2s. So make sure that you are intentionally placing the Neurotyrant because he's monster keyworded. Zoanthropes are not. So Neurotyrant is going to have to move around walls where the Zoanthropes are going to be able to move through it. So don't catch yourself in a weird position where you actually can't move your Zoanthrope brick at all because your Neurotyrant isn't going to be able to be where he wants to be. So really make sure that you're paying attention when you place them. And you absolutely always have to be within 6 for the Hive Tyrant, for the Lethals, and Assault Aura, because the Zoanthropes, they only move 5 inches. And in the video, you'll see in a second, you really need to have the Hive Tyrant next to them so that they can actually project their damage. And last but not least, set up really strong overwatches with them. The Neurotyrant has a very strong flamer, and then the Zoanthropes can either have just native lethals off of their last cannons, or they can get lethals and hopefully sustained if you're an invasion fleet off of the Hive Tyrant's aura. They're a pretty strong overwatch. We're back in TTS land. Show off positioning these Zoanthropes around the Hive Tyrant, making sure that they are safe and one that they can activate into whatever they want to activate. And there's a couple of cool things that you can do with Zoanthropes and the Hive Tyrant's aura just because they're infantries, and they can string out quite a bit. All right, so I have my Hive Tyrant behind my Zoanthropes here, and I have my Neurotyrant that's actually supposed to be right here. Now be careful with this placement. This is again just a silly example. Now if I'm deploying, I would not put my Zoanthropes there because they can be shot by an angle right there. Of course, if you pre-measure and make sure they can't, to put them here, but it's probably not a good place. But this is just an example. Maybe if this guy was like here, it probably would be the same. All right, so first we're going to advance the Zoanthropes. Let's say we don't get a 1. Let's see. Okay, let's see. We roll average. Let's say we get a 3. That's incredible that happened. All right. Okay, so we can move them 8 inches, but we don't really want to move them the full 8 inches. We're just going to move them so that they are out here. Like maybe that back guy would move the full 8 inches. Boom. And then he's 8 here. And I'm doing the dog bone thing right here with these Zoanthropes to make sure that everything else is going to be hunky-dory. Okay. These guys are moving out too. Again, be careful with your Zoanthropes. I would only commit them in this way if you're really, if you feel like you don't really need them anymore, or if you feel like this is kind of just the go time for them. Let's get that guy here. And a good thing to note that the Neurotyrant, 1, cannot move through this wall, so we're going to have to move him a little bit differently. And 2, he moves 6, not, what am I saying, 5. So Zoanthropes are pretty slow. So in this case, coherency might be kind of rough, right, over this wall. So we might want to just scoot this guy just a little bit closer here. Boom. And then he should be able to touch that guy with 2 inches. And the reason why we want this Neurotyrant to be able to touch there, because then there's a weird triangle between these 3, right? Okay. And so the Zoanthropes actually take quite a bit of a footprint here. And that means that my Hive Tyrant can extend over here to project the 6 inches, or it can extend over here to project the 6 inches. And I think we're actually going to project over this way in case something wants to charge my Zoanthropes from over here. Then my Hive Tyrant can protect through a heroic intervention. I'm just going to move him up there. and we can be right there. Now, if you're not really wanting to protect through a heroic, which oftentimes I'm not really doing that with the Hive Tyrant too much. So if you don't want to do that, then there's a pretty good case that you just want to put your Hive Tyrant here, and he can just project his Assault Aura and Lethal Aura through here as well. Now, if he's over here, you could roll an advance on him, and then maybe he is going to go this way. Here, he's going to move 13. He'll move right there. And then again, boom. He's going to project his Aura. Even though he's just barely touching that Neuro Tyrant, everybody gets the benefits of it, and it is very, very quite strong. Okay, so now the reason why the Zoanthropes are actually very, very strong right here is because, one, they're going to be able to shoot whatever is over here, you know, whatever they're setting up to shoot, they're going to be able to get. And then also in your turn, they're also going to be able to set up a disgusting Overwatch. So if you're an invasion fleet, which I think we're kind of invasion fleet with the models that we have on the board right now, you're going to get maybe sustain. If you're going against infantry, you really want sustain with the Zoanthropes, and then also because of the Hive Tyrant, you're going to get lethals as well. So it's going to be 63 blast, sustain, and lethal. That's strong, you know, because you're going to be 6 inches from the Hive Tyrant, and then you take your imperative or your adaptive as a sustain against infantry. It's very strong. And then the Neuro Tyrant is also going to make sure he covers the objective here, so that if anybody steps out, you can get him with your big old flamer. If you position your Zoanthropes correctly and you hang out with the Hive Tyrant and you're an invasion fleet, you can dish out quite a bit of damage in the shooting phase and also threaten a disgusting Overwatch in your opponent's movement phase. In conclusion, the bugs can actually shoot kind of hard, but you really have to stack the buffs that the Hive Tyrant gives you, and you really kind of have to lean on the Hive Tyrant in order to make sure that you have the position you need, as well as the lethals, because historically we don't have very high strength on our guns. So, you know, just hitting on 6s, wounding something is very, very helpful. It's all about planning. If there's one thing that you take away from this video is I would highly encourage you to start, or at least try to bring an extra Hive Tyrant, a 60mm base of some proxy of some kind, in order to help plan out your movement as well as your shooting phase. Be incredibly intentional about where you place that Hive Tyrant to make sure that your Exocrines, Tyranofexes, and Zoanthropes are sitting pretty after they advance. That is it for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and listen to me ramble about our shooty bugs. If you want to see my Tyranids in action, check me out tomorrow night on Wednesday Night Warhammer. I'm bringing a list with 3 Norn Emissaries and 3 Maliceptors. It's going to be a good one. All right, everybody. Thank you so much again. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.